The Mississippi does not forgive. It moves with a patience older than memory, a black vein through the land swollen with secrets it was never meant to keep. When night presses heavy and the mist hangs low, the river speaks, not with words but with sounds that crawl into bone. A clink of metal where no boat stirs, a sigh that does not belong to wind, a hollow cry rising then cut short, as though a throat were forever bound beneath its surface. The enslaved know this sound. They call it the murmur of chains. By day the river looks harmless enough, glittering under the sun, ferrying sugar and cotton as though it were no more than a road made of water. Planters boast of its riches, calling it the lifeblood of their empire. But by night, when the cypress trees bend over its banks and the owls fall silent, the river's skin ripples with something deeper. Beneath the drowned turn in their graves. Beneath the iron of shackles knocks against stone. It is said that the Mississippi remembers every name it swallowed, and it repeats them over and over in a tongue no white man can hear. On such a night, an old woman comes to the bank. Her back is bent, her head wrapped in ragged cloth, her feet bare in the mud. Her eyes, clouded with cataract, see nothing, but she feels everything. The pull of the water, the tug of voices, the sorrow that clings like smoke. She kneels and whispers, "I hear you." The river answers with a low groan, as if exhaling centuries of grief. Chains break. She breathes again, though her voice quivers. Chains break. From the current, a splash, soft, deliberate, like a hand rising, then sinking again. Not far from her, a boy lingers. He is no more than 12, skin raw from the day's toil, eyes wide with something like hunger. He has been sent to fetch water, but he does not move. He hears the voices too. At first they are muffled, just the shifting rush of current. But then they sharpen, threading into words that no one has taught him. Wait, burn, rise. His fingers go limp, and the gourd tumbles into the mud. He stares into the black water, and for a heartbeat it stares back. The river shows him faces. Not clear, not whole, only glimpses. Cheeks bloated, eyes white and wide. Mouths open in eternal screams. Their skin drifts like torn cloth, their wrists bound with rusted shackles that drag them deeper, deeper. He should turn away. He should run, but he cannot. One figure rises higher than the rest, its face a blur of flesh and bone. It opens its mouth, and though water pours from it, words slither through. Take fire to the masters, march, march until the city burns. The boy's knees buckle. His breath turns to mist. He staggers backward, but the voice clings like tar in his skull. The old woman lifts her head. Though her eyes are blind, she knows the boy has seen. Do not fear them, she croaks, but her lips tremble, for even she fears the moment when whispers become commands. All along the coast, others begin to feel it too. A strange heaviness in the air, like the world holding its breath. Drums hidden in cabins quiver though no hand strikes them. Cane fields shiver without wind. Dogs howl through the night, refusing to draw near the riverbanks. The planters mutter of storms. Their wives lock shutters, uneasy, yet they do not name what they feel, for to speak it would be to admit that the land itself resists them. At dawn, the river is quiet again. Too quiet. No birdsong, no buzzing of insects, just the low, steady murmur of water dragging itself forward. The boy does not sleep that night nor the night after. Each time he shuts his eyes, he sees those swollen faces, those jaws moving in unison beneath the current. The drowned are patient. They do not fade. They do not forgive. They chant soft but steady, until his heart beats in rhythm with them. On the third night, the river bares its teeth. Chains rise above the surface, tangled and dripping with weed, clattering against each other though no hand holds them. A ring, a shackle, a length of iron eaten by rust, all of it floating, then sinking again, as though some giant wrist had yanked it down. The boy screams. His cry carries through the cane fields, thin and shrill. The old woman, still by the bank, only smiles a toothless grin. They are restless, she whispers. The drowned do not sleep easy, and then silence. The river stills. The chains vanish. The faces sink. But in the mud where the boy had dropped his gourd, something glitters. A broken shackle, wet and new, though it should have rusted away long ago. He bends to touch it, hand trembling. The metal is ice cold. It rattles once, as if alive. The boy jerks his hand back. His breath comes in ragged gasps. He turns to run, but the river speaks again, louder than before. This time he hears not whispers, but a chorus, hundreds of voices, heavy as drums, low as thunder. We rise. We rise. We rise. The ground beneath him quakes. The cane rustles violently, though no wind moves. The old woman throws back her head and begins to laugh, high and cracked, her blind eyes gleaming like white moons. And in the boy's ears, the sound of chains drags closer and closer, as though the river has chosen him to carry its curse inland. The last thing he sees before he flees into the darkness is the reflection on the water, not his own face, but a row of heads bloated and swaying, staring at him from beneath the current. The night was swollen with silence, a silence so deep it pressed upon the chest, so vast it seemed the earth itself had ceased its breathing. Yet beneath that silence, hidden, muffled, forbidden, was a pulse, a rhythm soft as a moth's wings, steady as a heart grown restless. The moon leaned low, veiled in mist, listening. The drums had awakened. They were not loud, not yet. No overseer would have heard them, even if he prowled the cabins with a lantern in hand and suspicion in his eyes. But those who had ears to listen felt the first taps trembling in the marrow of their bones. A hand brushed hide, then withdrew. A cautious thrum, a breath of defiance disguised as music. Every enslaved man and woman knew the danger. Drums were forbidden. The masters had outlawed them, fearing the language they carried, fearing their power to call, to summon, to bind voices into one. But still they survived, buried in dirt, hidden under floorboards, disguised as hollow gourds. Their skins had grown dry with years of silence, but tonight they stirred, thirsting for hands. In one cabin, a girl of 14 pressed her ear to the earth. Her mother hushed her, pulling her back to the pallet, but she shook her head. "They're speaking," she whispered. Her mother slapped a palm across her mouth. "Do not name it." But the girl's eyes glowed in the dark, lit by something her mother dared not look upon. Across the cane fields, in shadows thick as tar, another rhythm answered. Then another, and another, spreading like sparks buried under ash. No two sounded the same, some quick, some slow, some broken into irregular stutters, but together they formed a breathing cadence, one heartbeat calling to another until the night itself began to throb. Those who slept tossed and moaned, stirred by dreams not their own. Those who woke sat upright, the whites of their eyes flashing like crescent moons. The land itself seemed to listen. The planters stirred in their great houses, restless without knowing why. One man dreamed of the cane turning black, every stalk bending toward him like 1,000 blades. Another woke choking, his lungs filled with the phantom taste of smoke. Their wives clutched rosaries, muttering prayers they could not finish. Even the hounds in the yards whimpered, pressing their bodies low to the ground as if cowering from thunder. But the sound was no thunder. It was older, heavier, more patient. It was the sound of a people remembering their own heartbeats. At the edge of the river, the boy who had seen faces in the water now sat with eyes wide, his body rocking to the rhythm. His lips moved, though no words emerged. He clutched the broken shackle he had found, pressing it against his chest like a relic. The iron was cold, but it pulsed faintly in time with the drums. The blind woman knelt beside him, her head swaying as if she too felt the beat in her skull. Her mouth split into a toothless grin. "They call you," she whispered. "They call us all." Somewhere in the darkness the first chant rose. Low, breathless, more exhale than word. "Rise," another answered. "Rise." Soon the air was full of it. Not loud, not a shout, not yet, but a murmur, a tide of syllables swelling and breaking. The drums grew bolder, each beat sharper, more certain, until the very earth seemed to shake beneath their weight. The girl in the cabin slipped from her mother's grasp and pressed her palm flat to the floor. "They are coming," she said, her voice trembling with awe. The cane fields writhed. The stalks bent in unnatural unison, whispering against each other, making a sound like 1,000 blades unsheathing. The moon, pale and trembling, seemed to dip closer, as if she too yearned to hear. And then, silence. For the briefest breath, the night went still again. It was only then that the true rhythm began. A drum cracked like a gunshot, loud enough to split the silence open. Another followed, and another, until the hidden music burst forth like fire catching dry leaves. The beat rolled across the fields, over the river, into the very marrow of the land. Feet stomped in answer. Hands clapped. Chains rattled in rhythm, turned from instruments of bondage into instruments of war. The planters woke in terror, scrambling to windows, peering into the night that seemed alive with motion. But they saw nothing, only darkness, only the suggestion of forms moving just beyond the edge of lantern light, and still the drums beat. The boy by the river lifted his head. His eyes glowed with a feverish light, his mouth opening at last to whisper words not his own. "They say it is time." The blind woman shuddered, her grin splitting wider. "Then let the world tremble." In the cabins, men and women rose as one. Their faces were shadowed, their hands clenched. The children huddled silent, watching with eyes round as coins. None spoke above a whisper, but all felt the same pull, the same summons. The drums grew faster. The chants grew louder. "Rise, rise, rise," and then the moonlight faltered. Clouds swallowed its glow, plunging the fields into pitch black. Yet in that darkness shapes flickered, faces pale and swollen like those drowned in the river, marching between the rows of cane. Their mouths opened and closed in perfect rhythm with the drums. The boy saw them first, but he did not cry out. His lips only moved in time with theirs, repeating the chant until his voice broke. "Rise, rise, rise." The hidden drums did not fade. They grew louder, sharper, until the very earth seemed to split. The sound rolled like an approaching army, though no soldier could yet be seen. And then, one final crack, louder than thunder, louder than musket fire. The night itself seemed to split open, and in that fracture, something vast, unseen, and unstoppable began to march. The cane did not grow quietly. It hissed when the wind slid through it, a sound like knives unsheathed, a ceaseless rasp that never let the night rest. Under moonlight, the stalks swayed like serrated spears, their shadows sharp enough to cut. Every leaf was an edge, every blade a tongue, whispering of hunger. Those who toiled in the fields felt it keenly. Bare hands sliced, wrists burned, backs ached as though flayed by unseen whips. The cane drank their sweat, their blood, their marrow until it stood taller than any man, and yet it was not satisfied. There were stories, old ones carried in whispers across the ocean, that the cane was cursed from its very roots, that it grew fat only when fed suffering, that each stalk was a prison where the cries of the dead were trapped, trembling, waiting to be cut free. Those who bent over the rows at dusk swore they heard it, a faint murmuring when the sun dipped low, breaths in the rustle, groans in the leaves. The overseers dismissed it as nonsense, but even they did not walk the fields alone at night. On this night, the cane leaned lower than usual, bowing under a weight unseen. The stalks arched like penitents before an altar, as though awaiting some great visitation. Their blades scraped against one another, sharper than steel, and the sound spread across the fields like a hiss of warning. The boy who carried the shackle walked there now. The iron weighed heavy in his hands, yet he clutched it as if it were a torch. His eyes were wild, fevered, drawn again and again to the rows around him. He whispered to himself, though his lips shaped words that belonged to no living tongue. Behind him, the blind woman followed, her bare feet sliding through the dust. Her mouth worked in a crooked smile. "Do you hear them?" she rasped. The boy nodded without looking back. "They are thirsty." The cane leaves sliced his arms as he passed. Thin red lines welled upon his skin, but he did not flinch. Each drop fell to the soil, and the stalks seemed to shudder in response, swaying harder, closer, sharper. The woman inhaled deeply, her nostrils flaring. "They have tasted you. They will not forget." Elsewhere in the rows, other figures stirred. Men and women, ragged from the day's toil, moved between the stalks. They had not planned to meet, not openly, but the drums had pulled them here step by step. Their feet crushed the brittle husks underfoot. Their voices murmured low, almost drowned by the rasping chorus of the cane. One man stopped, his chest heaving, and pressed a palm to the stalk beside him. He drew it back with a hiss. Blood trickled down his hand, though no blade had touched it. "The fields know," he whispered. "They wait." Another voice answered, hoarse and trembling. "Then let them drink." Above, the moon sagged behind a veil of thin clouds. Its light poured faintly down, silvering the stalks until they looked like a million knives thrusting toward heaven. The air was heavy with the smell of sap, sweet and cloying like rotting fruit. But beneath it lay something darker, the iron tang of blood, though no battle had yet begun. The cane trembled violently, as if moved by breath, not wind. And then came the sound. It was faint at first. A wet slurp like lips pressed to flesh, then another. Then a chorus of sucking, dragging noises that rippled across the rows. The slaves froze, their breath shallow, their eyes wide. The boy tightened his grip on the shackle. His knuckles whitened. He heard words in the rustle of leaves, words that clawed into his skull. Feed us, feed us, feed us. A man staggered forward, the cane slicing open his shoulder. He cried out, stumbling to the dirt. But the stalk that had cut him bent lower, its leaves trembling like tongues. Drops of blood clung to its edge, glistening. The sound of sucking grew louder. The woman hissed through her toothless grin. They drink deep tonight. The others watched in horror as the stalk straightened slowly, its leaves glistening wet, its sap darkened with red. The hiss of the fields rose into a roar, like 1,000 knives clashing together. The boy pressed the shackle to his chest and whispered, "They are ready." One by one, the enslaved began to bleed. Tiny cuts, almost invisible, bloomed along arms, legs, faces, each sting sudden, sharp, unavoidable. The cane leaves reached for them, bent to them, sliced into them as though guided by unseen hands, and as the blood dripped into the earth, the fields shivered with satisfaction. The rows bowed lower still, 1,000 blades curving toward the ground in reverence. The murmuring grew louder. It was no longer the sound of leaves. It was chanting. Words layered upon words, groans stacked upon groans, blood, blood, blood. The slaves did not flee. They stood trembling, their skins slick, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the hidden drums. Fear and awe braided together, binding them in silence. One voice broke through, a whisper so faint it might have come from the earth itself. It has begun. The moon flickered behind its veil. The wind died. The cane froze in place, every stalk upright, every blade rigid, as though listening for the next command. And then, the sound of dripping. Slow, steady, thick. The soil at their feet gleamed black, soaking up what it had been denied for too long. The sweet smell of cane rotted into something acrid, metallic. The air curdled with it, heavy and choking. The boy raised his head. His eyes shone with fever. "The fields are fed," he whispered. The stalks bent once more, this time not in reverence but in allegiance. They leaned toward the road, toward the path where the march would come, their blades glistening as though sharpened by the blood they had tasted. The blind woman lifted her arms. "The earth itself has chosen," she croaked, "and it will not go hungry." From the center of the fields came a sound that froze them all. Not drums, not chants, not wind, but the low guttural bellow of something buried too long beneath the soil. The cane quivered violently, as though shaken by that breath. The ground cracked open in small, jagged lines, releasing the stink of rot and iron. The slaves clutched one another, their bodies trembling. The boy clung to his shackle, his teeth bared in a rictus grin. And in the distance, faint at first but growing louder, the hidden drums began to beat again, this time joined by the rasping hiss of cane turned to steel. The fields waited, knives in the dark. Midnight arrived like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, thick with a silence that quivered on the edge of rupture. The fields, the cabins, the river all waited. The drums had carried their summons. The cane had tasted its blood. And now the hour had come for fire to answer. And so it began with a torch. A single flame, trembling in the night wind, cradled in the hand of a man whose face gleamed with sweat. His eyes glowed not with fear nor with mercy, but with a fever long-starved of release. The torch hissed as sap and oil dripped from its ragged cloth. The darkness bent back before it as though recoiling from its hunger. He stood before a house, whitewashed walls, shutters closed, its porch sagging beneath the weight of stolen labor. For years it had stood unchallenged, its windows glimmering like watchful eyes, its doors swallowing the cries of those broken within. Tonight the house would speak differently. The man raised the torch. For a moment the flame faltered, shivering. Then he pressed it to the wall. The dry wood gasped. It caught with a sound like a scream. The fire spread quick, greedy, devouring paint, shutters, beams. Smoke roared upward, black and choking, as if centuries of cruelty had turned to ash in an instant. The walls groaned under the weight of their own sins, cracking, buckling, collapsing into themselves. Inside, the planters cried out. Some stumbled into the night, coughing, their pale faces lit by orange fury, but no one came to help them. The enslaved stood watching, their eyes gleaming in the firelight, their bodies trembling not with fear but with release. A voice whispered among them, too low for the flames to drown out. Let it burn. One torch became two. 2 became 4. Soon the night was freckled with fire, each blaze a wound torn open on the skin of the land. Cabins and cane rows lit like candles in the distance, their smoke twisting together into a black pillar that clawed at the sky. Every flame hissed the same word: justice. The boy with the shackle watched the houses writhe in fire. His thin chest heaved with each collapse, each crash of timber. The iron in his hands was hot now, pulsing like a living thing as though feeding on the heat around it. Beside him, the blind woman laughed, a high, broken cackle that split the air like shattered glass. "They fall," she crooned. "They fall as they made us fall." The boy whispered to her, voice cracked. "It is only the beginning." Through the haze, shadows marched. Figures rose from the fields and the cabins, stepping into the open, their silhouettes crowned by smoke and flame. They moved as one, their footsteps heavy, their voices thick with chants that beat against the earth. Chains clattered, not as bonds but as weapons, swung high, rattling with each step. Machetes gleamed. Axes glimmered red in the firelight. Every tool of toil had turned into a tool of retribution. Their chant was low, guttural, rising and falling in rhythm with the drums still hidden but pounding within them. "Rise, rise, rise." The planters tried to flee. Some fled on horseback, their shouts swallowed by the night. Others stumbled toward the river, gasping for breath. But the land turned against them. The fields were alive with fire, the cane bending low to cut their skin, to block their path, to drive them back into the blaze. The houses wailed. Timber split with sounds like breaking spines. Roofs caved inward as sparks erupted skyward, scattering like fleeing spirits. The sky itself glowed red, an omen written in smoke. And then the killing began. A man dragged from his porch, his throat crushed by calloused hands. A woman's cry silenced as iron split her skull. A master's blood soaked into the earth he had claimed as his own, darkening the soil like baptism. Each death came quick, brutal, merciless. The enslaved did not cheer. They did not weep. Their faces were carved from shadow, their eyes fixed on the fire. The vengeance was not theirs alone. It belonged to the land, to the river, to the fields that had demanded blood for centuries. The boy moved through it all like a sleepwalker. The shackle burned in his hand, branding his palm, but he did not let go. He saw shapes in the smoke, faces not of the living but of the drowned, rising in columns of ash, watching with hollow eyes. They spoke without mouths. More, he nodded, his lips trembling. Yes. One house still stood tall and defiant, its walls white even in the fire's glow. The largest house, the heart of the plantation. Its windows stared down like the eyes of a tyrant, its doors shut tight as though to resist. The enslaved gathered before it, their shadows stretching long, their breaths ragged. The boy stepped forward. He lifted the burning shackle high. The blind woman raised her arms. "Bring it down." The torches moved as one. Flames licked the porch, the windows, the roof. The house groaned. It writhed. It bellowed in fire like an animal dying slow. Plaster cracked, beams shrieked, bricks rained down. Inside, something screamed louder than wood or flesh, a howl that shook the very ground as though the house itself had a soul, and it was being ripped apart. The enslaved fell silent, watching in awe and terror. The boy's eyes widened, his knuckles white on the shackle. The blind woman's grin faltered, teeth bared as if in pain, and then the house collapsed. The roar was deafening. A cloud of smoke and ash surged outward, blotting the stars, choking the night. Sparks flew in every direction, drifting across the fields like cursed fireflies. When the smoke thinned, nothing stood but a skeleton of charred beams, crackling, glowing red. From within the ruin, something moved. At first it seemed no more than shadows flickering in the smoke, but then they stepped forward. Figures tall, blackened, their bodies still aflame, faces gone yet eyes burning with a pale fire. They stumbled out of the wreckage, not screaming, not falling, but walking. Walking toward the slaves, their jaws open in silence, their hands stretching forward as though to drag the living down with them. The boy's breath caught in his throat. The blind woman hissed through her teeth. The drums in the distance did not falter. They grew louder. The night was not finished. The road was no longer a road. It had become a vein of darkness, pulsing with footsteps, trembling under the weight of a tide that had broken free of its dam. From horizon to horizon, shadows moved as one, their bodies cloaked in smoke, their faces half hidden by the glow of fire behind them. The air itself shook with their chanting. low, guttural, rising and falling like waves dragged by a moon no longer content to shine. Hundreds marched. Every step was a drumbeat, heavy and final. Bare feet struck the dirt. Iron chains clattered, machetes gleamed dully in the night. Tools once meant for cane and cotton now swung like blades of war, glinting in the firelight. The procession stretched long, endless, their silhouettes crowned by the smoke of burning houses left behind. Their shadows seemed taller than flesh, stretched and distorted across the earth, as though the dead themselves walked with them, hidden in their forms. From the fields, the cane bent low, whispering with each sway. From the river, mist rose and coiled, wrapping around the marchers like winding sheets. The land itself leaned in to listen, and the chants. The chants. They began as a murmur, uncertain, caught in the throat. But soon they grew steady, rolling forward in unison, a hymn of vengeance, a hymn of release, a hymn that seemed older than the soil itself. Rise, 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 the sound bled into the night, bleeding like smoke into every cabin, every hollow, every tree. It was not taught. It was remembered. It was not led. It was born. The voices cracked, bled, but never broke. The boy with the shackle walked among them. His small frame swayed in rhythm with the chant, his lips moving without pause. The iron in his hand pulsed hot and alive, branding his palm as if it demanded to be carried. His eyes were wide, unblinking, caught between awe and terror. Beside him, the blind woman stumbled forward, her arms raised as though she could see what none of the others did. Her toothless grin cut wide across her face. "They march with us," she hissed. The boy turned, trembling. "Who?" "The drowned. The burned. The broken. Do you not hear them singing?" The boy swallowed, and for the first time he did, for between the living voices came another sound, thin, hollow, layered like wind through a graveyard. The chants doubled, trebled, multiplied until it seemed that 1,000 unseen throats had joined in. The living spoke in flesh, the dead spoke in echoes, and together their hymn shook the road. Faces appeared in the smoke, some pale, swollen, dripping water, others charred, skin peeling, eyes burned hollow. They drifted alongside the march, not ahead, not behind, but beside, mirroring every step, as though the procession was a river flowing with both the quick and the damned. The planters and their wives, hidden in their houses beyond the road, heard it and went mad. They pressed hands to their ears, but the sound crawled through shutters, through brick, through prayer. Their lamps shattered, their mirrors cracked. Their horses reared and tore loose from their tethers. They swore they saw shapes on the road, not of men and women, but of shadows taller than trees, crowned in smoke, crowned in flame, crowned in bone, and still the march went on. A man at the front carried a torch. His arm shook, but the flame did not falter. It bent low in the wind, painting the marchers in flashes of orange and black, their faces lit like masks carved of anguish. With every gust, the flame hissed as though whispering secrets into the night. Behind him, another carried a drum. It was small, cracked, patched with scraps of hide, but its beat carried above all else. Each strike was a heartbeat sharpened into vengeance, echoing through the marrow of those who heard it. The boy felt it in his skull. The woman felt it in her empty eyes. The marchers felt it in their feet, their spines, their teeth. Even the earth shivered under it. And then the moon broke free of its veil. Its pale light spilled across the procession, washing the road in silver. For the first time, the shadows grew clearer, less smoke than flesh. Faces were revealed. Faces of men hardened by toil, women scarred by lashes, children thin as reeds. Their eyes gleamed not with fear but with fire, a fire that no whip could quench. Yet among them, faces of the dead still lingered. A drowned man with lips torn open, a burned woman with skin that peeled in flakes. They walked seamlessly with the living, their steps soundless, their mouths open in eternal chant. The living did not turn from them. They did not falter. They knew these shadows were theirs. The road stretched onward, leading to the city. But it no longer seemed a city they marched toward. The road had become a grave procession, a funeral not for themselves but for the empire that had bound them. The torches flickered, the drums pounded, the chants roared, rise, 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 and above it all, the smoke twisted into a shape, long, thin, towering. A crown of fire, a body of ash. It hovered over the march, vast and terrible, a specter born from the joining of smoke and shadow. The boy looked up and gasped, the shackle burning his palm. "It walks with us," he whispered. The blind woman only laughed. "It always has. The road quaked beneath their feet. Houses in the distance seemed to shudder as if bracing for collapse. The air grew thicker, heavier, smelling of blood and ash. And then, from the far horizon came an answering sound. Not drums. Not chants, but the roll of thunder. No, not thunder. Musket fire. The smoke crown above the march tilted its faceless head as though listening. The shadows on the road paused mid-step, frozen in their hymn. The boy's lips trembled. "They come," he whispered. The drums beat harder. The chants grew sharper. The smoke thickened into a wall behind them, cutting off retreat. And the procession marched on, into the sound of gunfire, into the jaws of the waiting night. The earth moaned beneath them, each step a wound pressed deeper into its flesh. Dust rose like ghosts from the white road, swirling around bare feet, broken shoes, and the rusted clatter of chains swung not as fetters but as weapons. They walked as if the earth itself was already aflame, as if each step scorched and seared, as if they were treading a path that had long ago been promised in blood. The road to New Orleans stretched pale and endless before them, glowing like a bone picked clean beneath the moon. They marched in silence now. The chants that had shaken the fields fell away, swallowed by the enormity of the journey ahead. In place of words came breath, labored, heavy, harsh, the breath of those who had carried too much too long. The fire of the plantation still burned behind them, staining the sky with a bruise-colored glow, but ahead lay only the white road, stark, blinding, unmerciful. Each step on it felt like walking across a grave. The boy with the shackle limped. His palm blistered where the iron pulsed hot against his skin. His eyes were fixed on the road, wide and glassy, as though afraid to look left or right lest he see what walked with them in the shadows. He heard them still, the drowned, the burned, the broken, whispering just beyond the veil of sight. "They follow," he muttered. His voice was hoarse, cracked. The blind woman tilted her head, smiling through toothless gums. "Not follow, child. They lead." The boy shuddered, clutching the shackle closer to his chest. The marchers' torches flickered in the night wind, casting long shadows that twisted unnaturally across the pale road. Some shadows bent forward, others dragged behind, but a few moved of their own accord, stretching long, bending, clawing at the ground like creatures desperate to crawl free. One woman, her hair ragged and eyes hollow, gasped as her own shadow rose taller than her body, twisting its limbs into cruel angles. She stumbled but did not scream, for to scream would have given it power. Instead, she pressed forward, her jaw clenched, her eyes wet with the reflection of torchlight. The shadow sank back into the dust, waiting. The road itself seemed alive. Every so often it cracked beneath their feet, lines splitting through its pale surface like veins of bone. A sour smell rose from the ground, thick and metallic, as though blood had seeped into the soil long ago and had been waiting for the weight of these footsteps to stir it. The marchers whispered prayers under their breath, some to gods who had walked with them across oceans, others to ancestors buried in unmarked ground, others still to spirits whose names they did not dare speak. But all prayers ended the same way. "Guide us, guard us, let us not fall before the city." At the front of the procession, the drummer faltered. His hands, cracked and bleeding, trembled above the hide. The rhythm had carried them this far, but now the silence of the white road pressed heavy on his chest. The drum seemed to resist him, its skin tightening, its voice choked. He struck once. The sound cracked, sharp, unnatural. The marchers flinched. He struck again. This time the drum gave no sound at all. The blind woman laughed, a dry hiss that carried over the silence. "The road will have its own music," she whispered. "It does not need yours." And so they walked without the drum. The city lay somewhere ahead, its lamps, its towers, its wealth carved from their marrow. Some could already taste it in the air. A tang of iron and smoke carried on the breeze. Others swore they heard faint bells drifting faintly through the night as though the city was already tolling a warning. But the road between was long, merciless. And the road was not empty. They saw them first as glimmers in the distance. Torches not their own, flaring in the dark, too steady, too sharp. Then came the sound of hooves, the jangle of harness, the cold metallic promise of steel. The militia waited for them. The boy gripped the shackle tighter, his lips trembling. "They know," he whispered. "They know we are coming." The blind woman tilted her head back, inhaling deep as though she could drink the air. "Good," she said. "Let them wait." The marchers pressed on, But the road grew wider, brighter, until it seemed to glow beneath their feet like a path carved from bone. Their shadows stretched longer, merging into a single dark tide behind them. And in that tide, faces appeared, faces of the drowned, the beaten, the starved. Their mouths opened wide, their eyes hollow, and from them came a sound like wind rushing through 1,000 graves. The marchers heard it and did not break. They walked as though driven by the dead, carried forward by a tide too vast to turn back. The torches hissed in the wind. The boy stumbled, his knees buckling, but the blind woman pulled him up with a strength unnatural for her brittle frame. He looked into her eyeless sockets and saw fire where there should have been nothing. "We are not walking," she hissed. "We are being carried." And indeed, when he looked down, he saw the dust swirling not from their own steps but from beneath them, as though hands rose unseen from the earth, lifting them forward, shoving them down the white road toward the waiting city. The sound of hooves grew louder, the glimmer of muskets sharper. The militia was near. The marchers gripped their torches, their chains, their blades. Their breaths came ragged, heavy, but none turned back. The boy raised the shackle high, his hand blistered, his voice cracking as he spoke the word that rose unbidden in his chest. "Forward." The marchers answered with a silence so deep it made the road itself tremble. And then, from the horizon, came the first shot. A spark, a crack, a scream swallowed by dust. The white road drank the blood like water. The torches flickered. The shadows writhed. And above them all, a black shape rose in the smoke, taller than trees, faceless, crowned with flame, its arms spread wide across the road as if to greet the slaughter that was to come. The night split open with a crack that was not thunder but wished to be. The air shook, the road leapt, and for a moment the sky itself seemed to recoil from the sudden flare of gunpowder. The marchers staggered, their torches trembling, their shadows jerking wild across the pale road. Then came the second shot, and the third. False thunder rolled across the fields, stitched with smoke and fire. The militia stood ahead, rows of pale men, their coats stiff, their muskets braced, their faces set like stone chiseled for graves. Their torches burned steady, disciplined, without fear. Unlike the wildfire that crowned the procession behind, they moved with the weight of empire, with the arrogance of those who believed the land itself bent to their will. Steel sang in their hands. Bayonets caught the moonlight, thin silver tongues waiting to taste blood. Yet even as the first ranks of rebels fell, struck down by lead and flame, the voices did not falter. The chant rose louder. "Rise, rise, rise." It did not come from mouths alone. It came from the dust, from the cane, from the drowned in the river and the burned in the fields. The marchers sang with their blood. The dead sang with their echoes, and together they wove a hymn too vast to be silenced. The militia shifted uneasily. For every shot that found its mark, a voice answered from the earth. For every man or woman who crumpled into the dust, a shadow rose taller, more defiant, stretching long into the night. The boy with the shackle stumbled as the first volley tore through the air. The iron in his hand seared his flesh, burning as though it had been struck by the musket fire itself. He cried out but did not release it. Beside him, the blind woman raised her face to the storm of powder and smoke, her toothless mouth wide with laughter. "Pale fire!" she shrieked. "It blinds them, not us." The boy gasped, trembling. "We are dying." She leaned close, her breath like smoke. "We are not dying, we are being remembered." Bodies fell. The white road grew red. Some rebels broke, turning. But the smoke behind them writhed into walls of shadow, closing off retreat. The dead would not allow flight. They pressed the living forward toward the pale fire, toward the steel. Chains swung high, striking sparks against bayonets. Axes crashed down, splitting wood and bone alike. The air became a storm of screams, iron, and smoke, and still the chant grew louder. The militia tried to drown it with their thunder. Shot after shot tore into the tide, but each crack seemed hollower, each flare paler as though the powder burned weaker against the weight of voices. Their disciplined lines wavered, their pale fire paling further with every heartbeat. One soldier swore he saw faces in the smoke, blackened skulls grinning, drowned eyes watching, burned flesh peeling as it reached for him. He screamed and dropped his musket. Another fled only to be seized by the cane fields, their stalks slicing his flesh, dragging him back into shadow. The pale fire faltered. The boy pressed forward through the storm, his body battered, his ears ringing with false thunder, He saw the militia ahead, their faces drawn, their torches like sickly stars. He lifted the shackle high, though his hand bled freely, the iron dripping with his blood. It pulsed. It gleamed. It answered the fire of the muskets with a fire of its own, dark, red, alive. The blind woman's voice rang out above the chaos. "Their fire kills! Ours remembers!" A soldier charged, bayonet lowered. The boy stumbled back, raising the shackle instinctively. The blade struck the iron, and the musket burst apart in his hands, fire erupting backward, consuming the soldier's chest in a sudden bloom of flame. His scream was swallowed by smoke. The boy gasped, staring at the iron now glowing as though forged anew. His knees buckled, but the woman seized his shoulder, steadying him. "Carry it, child," she hissed. "Carry the fire they cannot kill." The field was chaos. Smoke rolled like waves, torn open by sparks and screams. Men in pale coats swung their bayonets in panic as shadows closed around them. Chains cracked against skulls. Axes rose and fell. The white road was no longer white, but black with soot, red with blood. The rebels pressed forward not as men and women, but as a tide that knew no single body. Each death was swallowed into the chant. Each scream was added to the hymn. The living and the dead marched as one. The militia's torches dimmed. Their powder dampened. Their lines broke. Yet as they fell back, more torches flared in the distance. More pale fire, more steel. The tide ahead was endless, fed by Empire's hand. The boy saw them and felt his heart collapse beneath its weight. His legs trembled, his body weak. But still he walked forward, the shackle raised. His lips whispering a word he did not know he had remembered. Onward. The blind woman's laughter split the smoke, sharp as a blade. And then, as the false thunder echoed once more, the sky itself answered. A storm gathered on the horizon, black clouds rolling thick, swallowing the stars. Lightning split the heavens, jagged and merciless, striking so close the earth shook. Rain began to fall, hissing as it struck torch and powder alike. The muskets faltered. The pale fire sputtered, but the chant did not. And in the heart of the storm, as lightning crowned the sky, a shape rose from the smoke, tall, faceless, crowned with flame. Its arms stretched wide across the battlefield, its body stitched from shadow and bone. The militia saw it and broke. The boy saw it and dropped to his knees. The shackle burning so hot it seared his flesh to the bone. The blind woman whispered one word, so soft it was almost lost in the thunder. Now. The cane fields closed like a coffin. Tall stalks rose on every side, their blades whispering against one another, their shadows cutting the moon into slivers. The rebels fled into them, vanishing into green-black corridors, swallowed by rustling walls that seemed to breathe. And there, in the hush between gunfire, the hunted became hunters. The cane whispered with every step. Its stalks, sharp as knives, bent low to hide the bodies that moved within. Torches flickered in the distance, the militia pushing forward, their voices hard, their steel pale. Yet in the thick of the stalks, sight failed them. The cane turned friend to enemy, swallowing their formation, breaking their lines into fragments. Every rustle was a threat. Every shadow, a trap. The boy with the shackle crouched low, his bare feet sinking into mud that sucked and slurped at his skin. Blood stained the earth, fresh, hot, dark, and the soil drank it greedily, black puddles swelling where bodies had already fallen. The cane roots were drunk with it, their blades humming with a hunger more ancient than man. He pressed the iron against his chest, its heat steady, its weight unbearable. "Not yet," he whispered, though to whom he did not know. Beside him, the blind woman grinned, her eyeless sockets turned toward the sound of approaching boots. "They walk into the earth's teeth," she hissed. "And the earth is starving." The first soldier stumbled into the stalks, musket raised. His torchlight carved wild shapes across the green walls, and for a moment he thought he saw faces carved into the cane, grinning, grimacing, bleeding. He spat, cursed, pressed forward. A chain swung from the dark. It cracked against his skull. He fell, his torch sputtering in the mud, fire licking at the cane. The rebels fell upon him silently, their blades and tools striking swift. His body was swallowed by shadow, his scream cut short. When the militia came upon his light, there was nothing left but trampled stalks and blood shining black. The cane field became a labyrinth. The militia fired blind, their shots sparking brief flashes that only revealed more shadows. The air thickened with smoke, but the wind carried it low, choking their throats, blinding their eyes. Rebels struck and vanished. Steel met steel, then melted back into rustle and hush. One soldier swore he saw eyes glimmering from the cane itself, thousands of them, pale and wide. He screamed and slashed wildly, his bayonet splitting stalks that bled red as if they had veins. The field answered with silence. Then the silence broke with a whisper, "Rise." The boy crept forward, his breath shallow. Every sound was a blade pressed to his skin. The iron shackle pulsed like a heart in his hand. His legs trembled, his chest burned, but he pressed on. The cane brushed his face, its edges slicing small cuts that stung. The blind woman leaned close, her mouth at his ear. "Do you smell it?" He shook his head, trembling. "Blood," she crooned. "The field is drunk, child. Drunk and dreaming." He swallowed hard, for when he inhaled he did smell it. Thick, sweet, metallic. The air itself was wet with it. The battle grew ragged. Rebels lunged from the cane, striking, vanishing. Muskets cracked, torches hissed, stalks burned. Smoke twisted upward, the sky blotted black, sparks scattering like fleeing souls. The militia faltered. Their torches dimmed, their lines broke. They shouted, cursed, pleaded with one another. But the cane devoured their voices, bending, rustling, whispering. One soldier stumbled into a clearing and found himself surrounded. Figures rose from the stalks, faces streaked with soot, eyes gleaming, tools dripping red. Behind them, shadows swayed unnaturally, tall or boneless, their mouths wide. The soldier dropped his musket and begged. The cane rustled, and his plea was silenced. The boy pressed deeper into the field, his bare feet sinking further into the slick earth. He slipped, fell to his knees, and realized he was kneeling in blood. It soaked the soil, pooling, spreading thick as oil. He gasped, scrambling back, but the blind woman only cackled. "Drink, drink, drink," she whispered, running her fingers through the mud. "The earth remembers. The earth feasts." The boy stared, horrified, as the cane bent lower, its blades dipping into the blood, its roots quivering with hunger. The night howled with false thunder again. Muskets roared, torches flared, screams split the air. But within the cane the sound warped, distant, muffled, as if the field itself swallowed the noise, twisting it into something older. The boy heard it now, clear and low. Not thunder, not gunfire, drums that beat from beneath the earth, drums that matched the pulse of the iron in his hand. He staggered, clutching it close. It will not stop. The blind woman's grin split wide. Nor should it. The cane parted ahead, opening into another clearing. Rebels gathered there, their faces pale in the firelight, their bodies bloodied, their breaths ragged. They clutched chains, axes, machetes, but their eyes burned like coals. The boy stepped into the clearing, the iron raised, and the chant began again. Soft at first, then swelling. "Rise, rise, rise." The militia heard it and faltered. Their pale fire dimmed, but the earth was slick now. Too slick. Blood pooled deep, soaking boots, sucking bodies down into its mire. Soldiers slipped, rebels stumbled. The field drank without choosing, taking all into itself. One man screamed as the mud closed over his mouth, pulling him down. Another thrashed, his musket lost as the earth pulled at his legs. The cane bent low, bowing as though to watch. The boy stumbled forward, his knees sinking into the red mud. He raised the shackle higher, though his arm shook with the weight. His eyes fixed on the horizon, on the faint glow of the city beyond the smoke. The blind woman whispered, her voice cracked and wet. "We are being buried standing." The cane hissed. The torches sputtered. The chant roared louder, and then through the smoke, through the blood, through the endless rustle of cane came a new sound, low, hollow, echoing. The sound of heads struck from bodies, rolling in the mud. The boy froze, eyes wide. The blind woman tilted her face skyward, grinning as if she had been waiting. Now comes the harvest. The river wore its crown of death as if it had been waiting all along. Along the Mississippi, the wind whistled through jawbones. The sound was not the clean whistle of reed or pipe, but a hollow sigh like air forced through broken teeth. The water caught the sound, carried it downstream, and every village it touched seemed to grow colder, quieter, haunted by the echo. The reflection of the river was crowned in spikes and silence. They planted the heads at dawn. The militia, pale and hollow-eyed, lined the riverbank with sharpened poles. Each stroke of the mallet drove wood into earth, and each pole bore a burden, the severed head of the rebels, mouths frozen mid-chant, eyes glassy yet unbowed. The current licked at them, tugged at their hair, washed their faces with dark water. From a distance, the line of poles looked like a procession of saints drowned halfway, their crowns crooked, their eyes watching. "Leave them," the captain had whispered. His voice cracked, but not for mercy. "Let the river speak the warning." The people of the plantations came to look. Some crossed themselves, others spat, but most turned their eyes away. For the heads did not sag into death as expected. They seemed to lean forward, to glare, to whisper when the wind shifted. Children swore they heard drums when they stood too close, their small hands trembling as they clutched their mothers' skirts. By nightfall, no one lingered on the banks, not even the soldiers. The torches were planted and left burning, their smoke curling like black incense over the water, and the heads remained, watching, whispering, waiting. The boy with the shackle did not see his own face among them. He crouched in the shadows of the cane at the edge of the river. Mud streaked across his body, his breaths sharp as broken glass. His arm still carried the iron, though it was slick with blood, his own or others, he no longer knew. He whispered to himself, "I am not here. I am not here." But the heads seemed to hear him. Their eyes turned in unison, slow as the moon's rise, and the river shivered with the movement. The blind woman stood beside him, her sockets turned toward the water. She smiled. "They tried to bury the fire with flesh," she murmured, her voice like reeds breaking in the wind. "But you cannot silence drums with skulls." The boy clutched the shackle tighter. "Why do they stare?" "Because they are not done," she whispered. "The mouth does not need a body to speak, and the river carries every word." The boy wanted to look away, but the eyes on the poles dragged his gaze back. Each head swayed with the current, their jaws clicking faintly as though gnawing at the silence. That night the torches hissed low. The river thickened as if its waters had grown heavier, darker. Moonlight broke in fractured shards across its surface, painting the heads in silver streaks. The militia camped nearby, but their laughter was hollow, their songs forced. One by one their voices fell quiet, and the men turned to stare at the river without meaning to. They swore the faces had changed, that lips twitched, that teeth gleamed too brightly, that tongues wet with water moved behind blackened gums. "Eyes on the fire," the captain growled. But even his hands shook. The cane on the far bank stirred. A low rustling, though no wind passed. The militia froze. Their eyes darted to the shadows, to the narrow paths between the stalks, to the places where the dead had fled and the living had fallen. From the river came another sound. Subtle, rhythmic, unmistakable. Thumb, 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 drums. The captain rose, cursing under his breath. Superstition. Nothing more, but the men did not answer. Their eyes were fixed on the heads, for the mouths were moving now in unison, whispering a rhythm that matched the phantom drums. The boy closed his eyes, pressing his forehead to the mud. "Stop," he begged. "Stop, I can't." The blind woman placed her hand upon his head. "They are not speaking to you," she said softly. "They are speaking through you." The iron shackle in his hand throbbed like a heartbeat, heavier than ever. Each drumbeat seemed to strike within his bones. He lifted his head and saw it. The heads upon their poles swaying not with the river's pull, but with the rhythm of something beneath. Something old. Something unbroken. The soldiers began to break. One tore at his ears, screaming that the whisper was inside him. Another fired blindly into the night. The musket's flare lighting the heads in a ghastly glow, their jaws snapping open in the brief firelight, teeth flashing white. The captain raised his pistol, his hand unsteady. "Stand fast," but the river rose. Not in flood, not in wave, but in sound. The water churned with voices, with drums, with the weight of words too heavy for air. The spikes trembled, the heads rattled, and their whispers became one scream that split the night. The boy stood, mud dripping from his legs. His shadow stretched unnaturally long behind him, cast not by torch nor moon, but by something deeper. The blind woman laughed, her sockets gleaming wet. The river screamed again, and then the first head tore itself from its pole. It fell into the water with a splash, its mouth open wide, its jaw still whispering as the current carried it forward. One by one, the others followed, snapping loose, splashing into the current, their hair streaming behind like drowned banners. The militia watched in terror as the river filled with floating skulls, each one speaking, chanting, cursing, their faces turned toward the city downstream. The blind woman whispered, almost tenderly, "Now they march without bodies." The boy clutched the shackle, his breath ragged, his eyes fixed on the river of heads drifting toward New Orleans. The torches hissed. The drums deepened. The current grew strong, carrying the dead forward as though the water itself obeyed them. The last head on the pole, a woman's with her teeth bared, turned sharply, as if seeing him. Her lips moved, though no sound came, and in the silence that followed, the boy understood. The river was no longer just water. It was an army. The dead did not learn stillness. Even in death, the procession moves on. Through cane and swamp, through mud and bone, they walk. The night cannot bind them, nor can the river swallow their voices. What once was flesh and blood is now shadow and drumbeat, and what once was rebellion has become a wound that refuses to close. Some nights, the road still echoes with drums no one dares to follow. The moon sits crooked when they pass. Its light bends across the earth, casting shapes that are not the shapes of the living, shadows too tall, too thin, too endless, shadows of men whose spines were broken, women whose throats were cut, children who vanished beneath the cane. The sound comes first. Thumb. 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 Never hurried, never faltering. Always steady, like the heartbeat of the land itself. Dogs howl. Horses rear. Doors slam. Mothers hush their children. But nothing silences the road once it begins to speak. The old people in the parishes know the story. They whisper it to the young when the wind shifts, when the cane fields groan. They say if you walk too close to the levee at midnight, you'll see them. A line of figures crowned in smoke, their torches guttering with no flame, their chains clanging though no iron binds them. The blind woman walks at the front, her sockets burning with coals that are not of this world. The boy with the shackle still carries it, though now it is fused to his hand, molten, dripping fire that leaves no mark on the earth. And behind them, the hundreds march. Faces half in shadow, half in bone, feet bare, voices rising in the same wordless chant that once shook the fields. They walk because no grave would hold them, the old people whisper. They walk because the road itself remembers. Some claim to have seen them vanish when the cock crowed, their smoke thinning into mist. Others say they march past without notice, their drums pounding through bone and marrow until the heart nearly bursts. And some, trembling, insist the march does not vanish at all. It simply sinks into the earth, into the water, into the silence of history, waiting until another night to rise again. On one such night, long after the river bore its heads and the cane swallowed its blood, a soldier woke to the sound of drums. He had fled that battlefield years before, casting aside musket and uniform, swearing never to speak of what he had seen. But the sound found him deep in the night. He rose, shaking, lantern in hand, and stepped to his door. The road was no longer empty. The procession moved before his house, endless, unblinking, a tide of shadows that swallowed the night. His lantern flickered as the blind woman turned her face toward him, as if her sightless gaze could pierce deeper than eyes. The boy raised the shackle, glowing hot, and the soldier screamed, slamming the door. But the sound did not end. The march passed through his walls, his bed, his very bones, and by morning he was gone. Only the hollow echo of drums remained. The city remembers too. In New Orleans, the alleys sometimes ring with footsteps that leave no prints. Musicians swear their horns catch notes they did not play, bending into a rhythm older than their brass. In taverns, rum shivers in cups when midnight passes, though no hand disturbs the table. They are near, the barkeeps mutter, snuffing candles. Don't listen to the drums. Don't look out the window. But the curious always do. They peer into the night, into streets thick with fog, and see a flame guttering where no torch should be. And when they follow, if they follow, they are never seen again. The blind woman's voice rides the march. Not loud, not shrill, but steady as rain. We are not gone. We are not broken. We are the fire between your walls, the whisper under your beds, and the boy's silence is worse. His gaze fixed, his hand fused to the shackle, his shadow stretched far beyond his body. Some say he has forgotten he was ever a boy at all. Some say he is the march itself, the chain that binds the dead together. The road is endless. The drums do not falter. And so long as cruelty has roots, so long as the river remembers its drowned, so long as the cane tastes of blood, the march will not cease. A farmer near the levee swore last winter he saw them moving through the fog, their silhouettes tall and strange. He shut his shutters and prayed until dawn, but when he opened them again, his fields were lined with footprints pressed deep into the mud. The stalks bent in neat rows as though bowed to an unseen host. He left that land before the week was done, and still the march goes on. Past the plantations rotting in decay, past the cities that build their streets over bones, past the river that holds too many whispers. Some nights the sound is faint, no louder than a heartbeat. Other nights it shakes the earth, rattles glass, makes the sky itself tremble. It is not history. It is not memory. It is something else, something that will not be buried. The drums grow closer now. If you listen too long, you will hear them outside your door. If you look, you will see the torches guttering, the shadows stretching, and if you open the door, you will be swept into the tide, your footsteps swallowed, your voice bound into the chant, for the march never ends. And tonight perhaps it passes your house.